¿Qué onda, locos? Es lunes otra vez. You know what that means. Mexican Movie Monday. Today's movie we're going to be looking at is called Gueros. Güeros is a term I think a lot of us Latinos are familiar with, either by being called güeros ourselves or by somebody else being called that. Let me get this right off the bat. The movie is shot in black and white, but I think it was tastefully done. The director claims that he used a black and white element in order to remove the essence of color from Mexico City, since we often imagine it with a lot of color. So it forces us to look at Mexico City in a different sort of lens. I initially thought it was to force us to ask the question of how important skin color is to us. But it's also shot in a 4:3 format, the rectangle box format. And I think the element of the 4:3 actually works more effective than the black and white, since it adds a sense of urgency and paranoia. Alongside with one of the characters having sort of panic attacks, it feels almost claustrophobic with the quiet, loud dichotomy of sound you get throughout the movie. The movie is an over decade-long project from Alonso Ruiz Palacios, and I remember hearing the term güero a lot growing up, but I don't think I ever heard it in a derogatory manner. Oftentimes in Mexican culture, we often reference each other's skin color, but in a friendly manner. So we would call each other güerito, negrito, indio, mapache, but it meant pretty much nothing. It were just words. And in this movie, they use the term güero almost as a class distinction, like the proletariat versus the bourgeoisie. And I think if you add the term like pinche to the beginning of the word, that might be pretty rude. So if you remember that thing Sergio Goyri said,
que metan a nominar a una pinche india que dice,
I mean, that was pretty rude. And if you say like pinche güero, pinche güerito, that's pretty rude as well. But as far as the term in and of itself, I don't think so. I don't think it's rude. The story begins in Veracruz, with a lady trying to calm down a baby from crying, and a phone obnoxiously ringing. The element of this movie is almost contrary to that of Roma's silence. I believe the story of poverty is that of an overbearing noise, constant crying, screaming, and arguing. Then once Tomas throws a water balloon at the baby, you know he's about to get in trouble. Not a chanclazo, but he's gonna get in trouble.
In a traditional technique known as la chancla.
So Tomas is kicked out of his house. Tomas reminds me of my dumbass growing up, and my brother is a lot like Fede, aka Federico, aka Sombra.
¿Quién es Sombra?
Tú no me puedes decir así.
¿Por qué no, güey?
Porque te rompo las piernas.
The movie is said to take place at any time, but that it displays the time period of the 1999 riots. The protest of '99 is pretty much what Güeros is also based about. It's about the school UNAM adding an enrollment fee in order for students to enter the school. The brother lives in the F, or rather Mexico City, in this trashed house without electricity. Also, these two guys, Santos and Sombra, borrow an extension cord from the neighbor's daughter. The three friends then all become obsessed with Epigmenio Cruz, whose music is played on mute in the movie. I really like the way they speak about the different classes in this movie, specifically relating to the girl on the radio as a fresa.
Una fresa de letras tropicales que se apañó la radio del movimiento.
When Alonso Ruiz Palacios was describing the riots and people,
unos se metieron al movimiento, otros se cambiaron de escuela y otros no hicieron ni uno ni el otro.
He mentioned there were three types of people: those who were on strike, those who weren't, and those who were kind of in limbo.
El retrato de este estado de limbo, de no tener nada que hacer.
Estamos en huelga de la huelga.
Then the neighbors want to beat up Sombra and Santos, so they take off and drive. I'm a huge music fan, so I'm always paying attention to sound, and it's refreshing to feel the actual PTSD panic attacks Sombra has. I don't know how often directors fail to portray those sort of things. The story of Sombra is just like that of a lot of Mexicans, that is in a constant state of fear, reacting as if one might die when there's very little chance of it. And when real fear of death comes, the sound blares off to like a muffled underwater sound, while he is falling all over the stairs. They pick up Tomas and all head to the hospital to go find Epigmenio Cruz, Sombra decides just to go back there, and they talk to the director, I mean the doctor. So Sombra finally gets told he's having panic attacks. Once they leave the hospital, they accidentally head the wrong way.
Derecho, güey. Derecha me estás diciendo. Derecho, güey.
And get harassed by some sort of gang members. It's never fully stated. They get away and somehow end up at the school in time for a rally. The person yelling on the microphone is Sombra's lost love, the girl on the radio. You get to see Santos' thesis, who throughout the movie just makes you think he's a bit goofy.
Te presento a Santos. ¿Pero a qué chingados se refieren con desayuno continental? ¿A qué chingados se refieren cuando dicen desayuno continental?
But then you find out he's been studying on how to fix rainforests or something. So then the four of them head out on a journey to find Epic Menu. Along the way, a few shenanigans happen,
¿Sabes qué? Ya cerró.
but the main idea runs throughout. Young adults growing up in the city, stuck in limbo between education and progressive development. There's also this funny line where Sombra says something like pretentious Mexican indie filmmakers cast beggars and thieves in their film.
Cine mexicano. Agarran unos pinches pordioseros y filman en blanco y negro y dicen que ya están haciendo cine de arte.
And I feel like I've read this somewhere. Then I remember it, Jodorowsky. In El Topo, a book of the film, Alejandro Jodorowsky states that he hired beggars instead of using regular actors. The movie ends with them returning back into the rallies, and Sombra walking into the crowd. As Sombra ends up in the crowd, he looks back at his brother Tomas. Tomas takes out his camera and takes a picture of him. Looking back on it, Gueros is not only just a story of class distinction or skin color distinction, it's also identity distinction. They said at the time of 1999, when the schools were closed down, a lot of the students went without doing anything. So when Alonso Ruiz Palacios discusses this, he says that there were three different types of people. There were the people who were in the protest, there were the people who were against the protest, and there were people who did nothing. And I think that's important to know that around that time, there was just a bunch of people in limbo, without any sort of identity or any sort of educational background. They just went into a state of nothingness. And throughout the movie, when you're seeing him drive the car and he ends up in the same location over and over, and then they just decide not to go out, they decide not to do anything, and they become somewhat agoraphobic, either based on their PTSD from the previous scare of 1968 at the Loko massacre, or just based entirely on being powerless against the whole situation. I think the movie Gueros did very well for the question of Mexican identity. I think it asked the question of what we really see in each other. I think this is a movie I'm going to be thinking about for a very long time. Probably a movie I'm going to need to watch a few more times. And there was this one scene that really bothered me. It was when they get Epic Menu Cruz in the bar. It reminded me of a video I couldn't really recall right away. Then I remembered, the only other place I could have seen that is in Kuko's Hydrocone video. They look so similar, but it turns out they weren't the same bar. And I'll leave you with that. Go listen to Kuko. My name is Mexican Chuy. Hasta Manana, Lokos.